Alrighty, so what I wanted to do for you guys, of course, is finish this little gear for the guy. Now, I did want to kind of re-show you some of the basic stuff again. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to turn off snap, right? And believe it or not, that actual shrink wrap right here, you can actually, particularly for an object mode, so I'll go to 4, right, for object mode. You can actually apply it, right? And you'll see that it actually makes sure that that's kind of official, right? As long as that's off, or you just get rid of it without applying it, you'll see that the shape kind of pulls back off the surface again. So you really do want to finalize and get rid of the shrink wrap. You actually want to hit apply to it, right? So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through the same process and kind of build a little bit of gear from here and connect these up. And that'll be a cool way to kind of show you those steps again we did in the last video, but also show you how to join objects. Also, you'll notice how we have this collection up here. Right now, we'll just kind of use the default collection, but you can actually make your own and put some of your objects in there and have your cameras and lights, different ones. We'll show it later on. But one of the things you could do is right up here, let's move this down a little bit. Remember, you can actually grab the little bars here and make this bigger or smaller if you need to, right? So just keep that in mind. You can actually, whichever object you have selected, right? 4 is object mode, but of course it's right here as well. Whatever object you've selected, you see it selects it here. So this is very much like Maya's outliner, right? It's kind of the list of all your stuff that's in your scene. And a collection is kind of like a scene, if you will. Actually, you have a total scene collection, and collections can kind of be like groupings. So it's kind of neat once you get used to it. But we'll talk about collections a little bit later on in the year. But you can actually rename these objects, right? So if I double-click on this one, you'll see I can say, hey, this is going to be a crab body, right? So I can rename that crab body. And then, of course, it's going to be crab gear, so I can double-click on that one, and we can call this crab gear. So kind of neat. And you'll notice that you have eyeballs here, right? So you can turn these off and on, just like I did with my camera and my light, so I don't have to see those in the scene. Kind of cool little things like that that are kind of neat to know about. Now, in this case, I'm going to go back to the body, right? Remember, 4 for object mode, you can click on these in the viewport, right? Even though they are in your scene collection also. And renaming them can be a great way to see them organizationally for which one you want to turn your eyeball off on. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to maybe duplicate a face again off here, because otherwise Blender's stock is slightly weird about drawing topology on there unless you don't already have an existing mesh. That's why I use the Speed Retopo add-on. I'll show you guys that in later projects. For right now, the default retopo tools will work quite well for us because they are actually pretty good. So in this case, I'm just going to hit 3, right? Because 3 is face mode. It puts us into edit mode, but it does the face version of it, right? And what I could do is I could say, hey, I want to kind of start with this guy. So I'm going to select that face. And remember, we did this the other day, Control D, right? This is in the mesh menu, duplicate, Control D. And what that does, you hit Control D, and then you can just kind of click in the viewport, and it duplicates that polygon off into its own polygon, right? And it can be moved and it can be adjusted, right? So if I want to just, T for edge, 2 for edge mode, I've already got my tweak tool on, right? So you can just tweak this a little bit, just to kind of get a little bit better shape right there. There we go. Remember, I have a quickie set up for that, but remember, Q toggles you through all these options here, right? And if you left click on that, you'll see that those options right there, Q just toggles you through. And you see you can actually assign, even if you have a 4 or 5 button mouse, you can actually assign those buttons to those things as well. So I can go to circle select and tweak just through extra mouse buttons, right? So Blender really, really cool with this stuff. So in this case, I just copied those polygons off onto their own. But you'll notice they're still part of this one object, right? So that's kind of neat about that, is it still keeps them as one object. So if you just need to duplicate a bunch of rivets or other shapes and keep them as the same object, it's super easy to do in Blender. In fact, when you hit Control D, you can just start to left-click drag. So once you get used to it, and you'll see it more in later stuff, it's actually really quite cool that I could do that. But in this case, we do want to separate this guy, right? So I'm going to go 3 for face mode again, right? Remember, 3 is for face. Select that face. And, of course, you can right-click because that brings up your face context menu. And one of those options in there is separate. And this will actually take this selection, right? You have a couple of options, but we're just using selection. It'll separate this into its own object. So I hit separate selection. And now you'll see if I go to 4 for wireframe, click on it, it's its own object, right? Now what's really cool is if I select the other armor second, so hold down Shift. Remember, Shift adds to selections, Control subtracts. And I select that armor second. We're in object mode, right? 4 for object mode. if I right-click, the object context menus come up, and there's something called join. Now, for those of you guys that are familiar with Maya from last term, this is actually combine, right? Basically, it takes multiple objects and makes them into one. So I can just hit join, and you'll notice it combines them with the second one in the naming convention for the gear. So now these are actually all one object, right? Kind of neat, right? So you can actually go back and duplicate a different part of polygons if you want, separate them with their own object, and then join them to another object, right? So right-click and you have join in there, right? In this case, we don't have multiple objects, so the join option doesn't show up, but it would be there if we had multiple objects selected. So if I selected the crab, you see joins there. Kind of really neat. So there is indeed ability to separate and join stuff in Blender quite easily. Now in this case, I got rid of that shrink wrap, so I want to apply that again, right? So I'm going to go back to, remember, blue. That blue wrench is your modifier stack, and this is really important in Blender. You go to Add Modifier, right? It's that little pull down, and you'll see there's something called shrink wrap. Now initially you'll see it's kind of red because it needs a target object, right? And you notice my scroll wheel allows me to scroll down here. Blender 2.9, when it comes out later this summer, it's going to have some cool new features. One of them is you can actually drag and drop the order of the modifiers. So the interface will be slightly different. The modifiers, not radically different, but slightly different. So I'm just going to pick target, crab body. And you'll notice that all of a sudden this guy, remember how he was off the surface a little bit? Now it sticks to it. That's what shrink wrap does. Is it takes whatever polygons or vertices there and it kind of suctions them to the surface that's selected as your target. Really neat. You can use it for all kinds of geometry. It's a pretty neat function of it. It's important to doing retopologizing, and it's super easy to apply. I also like, just to give it a little extra precision, to use the snap, right? That magnet, just like in Maya, the magnet is your snap tools. Now this just turns snapping on. You'll see the kind of little pull-down menu next to it is actually your options for this. And you'll notice, particularly if you've spent time with Maya last year, that the amount of options you have for snapping is superior in Blender. Snapping tools in Blender are quite excellent. This is grid snap, but it comes with even more options than just that. Vertex, edge, face, right? So edge center, edge perpendicular. So there's some neat, really neat snapping tools. In this case, we want face because we're snapping to a surface. And you see you have even other options here. Closest is fine. Project individual elements is what we want on. And I made sure move, rotate, and scale is on. So you click on the magnet to turn it on, but you click on this little pull down next to it to actually tell it snap to faces. And then I just usually, closest is usually on by default. Project individual elements I'll usually make sure is on. And then move, rotate, and scale. And with this magnet and those options on and shrink wrap, you're going to have retopo tools that stick to the surface quite well, which is going to be really cool. So in this case, what we do is we actually just use our normal normal modeling tools, right? So if I go to 2 for edge mode, because that's important here, we're really working with edge mode here, right? Remember, 2 is your quick key for edge mode, but remember there's object mode and there's edit mode, this little pull down menu, and then there's buttons. But it's just great to get to know the quick keys because they're great for it. 1 for vertex, 2 for edge, 3 for face, 4 for object. So we're going to go 2 because we want edge selection mode in the edit mode functions. And as you saw from the other day, you're really just using things like your loop cut and your extrude. So in this case, I can just select this edge and then hold down shift to select the edge next to it. And we can hit Control E for extrusion. And then this middle mouse button, you'll see it extrudes along the surface. Now obviously, you see if you move stuff too close, the clipping and the merge will start to, from your mirror, will start to kind of do that. So you might want your merge limit even lower than the default we have here. It actually can be pretty much the default and you're fine. So you do want to be careful with that. You can always turn merge limit down to 0 and clipping off to kind of pull stuff apart initially and then kind of turn that back on at least a little bit in clipping to kind of readjust and fix those. But you notice as we extrude this, it's sticking to the surface, right? And of course, I can go to my tweak tool, right? So remember, Q is the quick key for just going through those. I have a quick key set for it. And you can just tweak these. So you notice your tweak tool fully works with the snap features we have here. And so you can easily go in here and just kind of move these around to get slightly better position for this stuff, right? This one we can see how we can make adjustments to. I can go to 1 for vertex if I want to kind of tweak some vertices along here just a little bit. But you see how it's sticking to the surface quite well, quite reliably. Then of course I can go 2 back to edge mode. And what I could do here is I could grab this edge, and I can hit Control E for extrusion. But remember, your move, rotate, and scale tools work. So I can hit E for rotate, and just use middle mouse button for that view rotate, but you see how it sticks to the surface? That's why we kind of turn the effect, move, rotate, and scales on, right? Because these will all work with it. I've actually even found if these aren't on, it still works quite well, but never hurts to really double check these things. So remember, magnet for snap. Click here to make sure you're on face, because that's edge, right? And you see how you can have a lot of the same stuff on for edge. But we want face, project onto self, project individual elements, move, rotate, and scale. R for scale if I want to make that a little smaller. And then, of course, we can hit Control E for extrusion, and I can move this down. You see how it's sticking to the surface? R for scale to scale it in a little bit. E for rotate to rotate a little bit. Remember, they're right here, but W is move, E is rotate, R is scale. Right? Middle mouse button. You see how it sticks to the surface. So you see this is actually quite cool. And of course, I can switch back to my tweak tool, and I can bring this one maybe forward a little bit more. 1 for vertex mode. You see I could go back in here, just do some nice little tweaks. Now, you'll notice we're not quite ready to connect these all up yet. We're going to do that in a minute here. I can make some adjustments. But you see how it looks like we're missing an edge loop, right? It looks like there should be an edge loop here. Your loop cut will work with this too, right? So Alt-C for loop cut. And you see I could put this in here, and that snaps the surface too. So you'll notice that really to make Blender have good stock retopologizing tools, all you really have to do, you don't even have to use the polybuild for it. In fact, I kind of feel the polybuild's in theory a cool option, but I just haven't found it's super friendly. But just with good snapping tool options on and shrink wrap, you can actually use all your normal modeling tools for this. But that's really what retopo tools are anyways, is just extrusion, loop cuts, and stuff like that, right? So what we can do is we can put that loop cut in there. And then I'm going to hit 2 to go to edge mode and Q to go back out to my selection tools. And what I can do is I could select these 2 edges, right? 2 edges to 2 edges. Blender, you can actually bridge uneven numbers to uneven numbers, but it will create triangles, right? So it's better if you want all quads to do same number to same number. So in this case, I've got 2 edges across from 2 edges. We haven't seen this tool yet, but it's quite an excellent tool. We're going to see it a lot in later modeling. But if you right-click in edge mode, right, because when you right-click, it always brings up your context menu for that selection type. In this case, edges. And you will see that there is something called bridge, right? Now, in real life, a bridge connects 2 separate parts of an area, right? Even a tunnel is kind of a bridge through something. That's what bridge does. It's going to create new geometry in between these edges. So I can do bridge edge loops. And you see how it created new quads in between there? And that's how you could start to connect up everything to get exactly what you want. Now we're still in edge mode, so if I want, I could still kind of tweak these down a little bit, just to kind of get them in a better place. In this case, maybe tweak this one in a little bit. 1 for vertex mode, so I could bring these in a little bit here. And you'll notice we can use tweak to kind of really adjust and pull these around a little bit, right? Keep in mind also that since I was using the original object that had the settings on it, remember, if you go to the orange little box right above the blue wrench, you will see there is a viewport display option, and you could turn on in front. And you set it kind of sets a display option up that shows this kind of overlying the other surface. So this is quite useful for when you're doing retopologizing, right? It's just the orange little box right above the blue wrench, viewport display, just turn on in front. There's actually other cool things that this can do as well, and we'll talk about those later on. But just for right now, in front is what we would want. Back to the blue wrench. And now if we want, just 2 for edge mode, right? And I could select these 2 edges, right? And I could right-click, and I could bridge edge loops, and you said just put those together. Now in this case, I think I could just double-click on an edge here, and it selects that whole border edge loop, right? And I could right-click. So remember, whatever selection mode you're in, when you right-click, it brings up the options, or at least most of the options for that tool, right? Not every single one of them, but most of them. And then you'll see that there is new face from edges, right? Now, if I was to hit 1 for vertex mode, you'll notice that that edge loop converts to vertices, which is great. That's one of the things that once you start using Blender more, you really start to love and appreciate that about Blender. And if I right-click, we have a new edge face from vertices. So these are basically both doing exactly the same thing, but you could do it to vertices selected. You could do it to edges selected, right? So in this case, I'll do it to edges, 2 for edge mode. When you right click, there is a new face from edges. And what that does, that creates a set of polygons here, right? That creates a set of polygons there. And that's really, really cool to have, right? So keep in mind that you want that. One of the things you might want to make sure you have on too is just your add-on preferences, right? And, just go to Edit, Preferences, just to make sure you have access to all of these, because sometimes some of these features are buried in the add-ons. And there is a section in the add-ons area, right? So this comes up. We have our key map. That's where it's turning district compatible on. Navigation, like I said, I like to use zoom to mouse position and set my zoom axis to horizontal. But add-ons, right? This is where you can turn on things that come with Blender. There's actually a lot of cool add-ons that Blender comes with, right? And so you'll see I scroll down here, and what I made sure to do is a lot of these are already on by default. UV layouts on by default. But what it is, I checked on Edit Mesh Tools. I checked on Loop Tools, right? And I checked on Magic UV. We're not going to use that quite yet, but that will come up. As we go along, I'll show you guys how to install add-ons. These are ones that come with Blender. You just have to turn them on, but it's actually pretty easy. You just go install and basically double-click on where you save the add-on at. But we'll talk about that later on, because I am going to have you guys grab a few add-ons that are free. That'll make Blender even stronger. So, but those add-ons are good to have on. So at this point, I'd make sure to turn those on. And if you go to the little edit tab here, you'll notice that you'll see in here some of the UV Magic stuff here. But you also see in Loop Tools things like Circularize. Face Tools has cut faces. This makes adding edge loops to selected a lot easier. So some neat things actually in here. Utility Tools has flip normals, easily accessed right there. Although you can, of course, get that from, I'm trying to remember that's at. It's a mesh, normals flip, all right? So, but it's kind of neat that you can get all these right here. You can always just kind of go down to item, though. There's these little tabs here that kind of show up some extra stuff. Edit will have these guys. And that's one of the reasons why when I right-click, you'll see that I have a couple of things above it, right? You see these guys above it? This should be in there by default. But these are, if you notice these in here and you're like, oh, why am I not seeing those on mine? You don't have the add-ons turned. But these come with Blender. When you download Blender, they're there. You just need to turn them on. And they're neat. They come with a couple of cool features. Like there's a flatten feature in there. Some cool stuff. So definitely want you guys to turn those on. But new face from edges builds a new polygon. And I started showing you guys this the other day as kind of a specific, hey, some of you guys are running into this. You have an end-gon right here, right? So if I go to 1 for vertex mode, right, I can select this vertex and this vertex, right? So shift, remember, just left click and then shift left click, because shift always adds to selections. And it looks like there could be an edge here. And you notice if I put an edge here that this big 6-sided polygon, right, because it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 vertices, will break into a quad. So remember, in vertex mode, if you right-click, connect vertex pairs. Remember, I've kind of shown that a couple times now in our little mini lectures, right? So connect vertex pairs, and aha, right? So you don't always even have to bridge. You can sometimes just kind of fill, right? And then my tweak tool's already on, which is great. I love that. Usually you can do these things without turning your tweak tool off. And once you get used to that, it's actually really, really cool and nice workflow, right? So we can easily tweak some of these a little bit more just to kind of get a better shape there for it. But it's cool that we know that when we right-click, we have things like, connect vertex pairs, fill faces, all that stuff. All right, so that's not quite what I'm done with. I want to thicken this now, but I don't really want the shrink wrap to be on anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to 4 for object mode, and I'm going to go to apply, so it applies the shrink wrap. There we go. You see it sticks to the surface pretty well. I'm going to turn snap off because we don't really want that on unless we specifically want to snap. So that usually should be off unless you're specifically doing things with snapping, which at this point we won't. And in this case, just select that crab gear again. I'm going to hit 3 for face mode. I'm going to select the face. And remember, there is the select linked, right? Select menu, select linked. I've assigned a quick key to it that's different, but it's actually kind of your right bracket key. I did a different one, Z, because that's something I use all the time, so it's better to have it where my left hand's at on the keyboard, right? Select linked selects all the connected polygons. And then what we could do, so that was just select a face and then select linked, and that just grabs all the faces connected to it. And then I'm going to go to face mode, and there's something called Solidify faces. And this is thicken. This is actually going to take these objects, and that's why I applied the shrink wrap and I turned snap tools off. We don't want those on when Solidify face is there. So you should apply your shrink wrap so it's gone, but the effects are there and finalized. And you want to turn your magnet off, right? Those are going to do weird things to your Solidify. So I go to face, and I go to Solidify faces. And initially it looks flat. So oftentimes your options for your tools will pop up in this little menu down here. So I can just click on that to open it, and there's our thickness control. And I can just left click drag to kind of slide it out, right? There we go. Now in this case you'll notice that it has the seam down the center. So what I can do is I can select these faces, hit delete for delete faces, right? So when you hit delete, it brings up all your options for deleting. Pick faces. In this case, if I want to, I can hit 2 for edge mode, and I can double click on that edge loop. We just hit W for move, and remember our clipping's already on, so as I move these towards the center, it'll auto weld those and keep them from pulling off. So you'll notice that clipping's awesome, but it's not magic. Certain functions will kind of do this, but it's really easy to fix. You just select the kind of face where it looks like it's not connecting, delete that. Delete. Remember, that's delete on your keyboard. Hit delete. Brings this option up, faces. And then, of course, 2 for edge mode, and I can double click on that edge loop and just move it over towards the center, and clipping will take care of the rest. I'm going to go back to 3 for face mode. I'm just going to do that select linked. Make sure to select the face, though, right? Select linked. And you notice it kind of looks like it's inverted. That's where we can go back to mesh, right? Normals, flip. And it flips those polygons to properly face outward. And then if we want to, we can just go back to the orange box, viewport display in front to kind of turn that off. And now you'll see that we actually have some gear for our character. All right, so that'll be a great place to stop this video.